Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Tim Ott. I am the chairperson for the City of Green's Human Trafficking Committee. And we can't thank you enough for being here today. Very excited about this event. I have to thank a couple of key people in particular. So many have played hands in what we're trying to do for the City of Green and the surrounding communities is really to provide some good education and awareness relative to this subject here. And here today we do have our mayor, who I recall probably maybe 3.5 years ago going to sit with Gerard and told him what was on my heart, and he was just real quick to say, hey, this city needs it, let's roll. So thank you, Mayor, for that. Valerie Wolford, the Communications Director, has just been my partner and invaluable with putting this event together. Thank you, Valerie. Julie McMahon from the school that many of you know, Joya Mitchell from the school, and many others. Many hands work together to try and get a message like this out to our community, so thank you all. I got to tell you, I love the City of Green. My wife and I moved here probably about 7 years ago, and we couldn't be happier. We both can tell each other honestly, we're never moving, so you're stuck with us, okay? We really love it here. I wanted to give you an idea what to expect today. We've got 2 hours, so we are fortunate to have just some incredible heroes here today. They are my heroes. They're incredible people, and I'm going to ask each of them to speak for about 10, maybe 15 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next person. I'll get to introduce each of the speakers. So that should take us about an hour to an hour and a half, probably an hour and a half, knowing these folks, they got a lot to say, which should leave us about 30 minutes for some Q&A at the end, okay? So we should have some time at the end to hear your questions. So we do ask you to write them down, put them in the mental lock, whatever. We want to make time for your questions. That's an important part of this, so we're going to do that as well. So these are some of the most terrific people I've ever met. Today they're giving us their time, their stories, their resources, and most of all, their hearts and their souls to help make Green a safer, stronger place. I mean, what's not to like about that? That's incredible. Thank you. Our goal today is threefold. First, as I said, education and awareness. We want to provide some education and awareness because, you know, this is an important message. And speaking honestly about myself, there was a time not too long ago when I didn't think this was a local problem, but it is. And we'll talk about that. Secondly, listen. Listen to the truth. You're just going to get the reality today, okay? You're going to get it from a lot of different angles. And that's going to be powerful. The reality is, yes, this ugliness has crept onto our doorsteps. It is here in Green. It is here in the surrounding areas. The third, I would ask you to share with at least one person when you leave here today, maybe more if you care to. Let's get this message out, okay? This is just the honest-to-God truth that you're going to hear today about what is going on, what's taking place, and equally, maybe more important, what we can do to protect ourselves, protect our loved ones, and our neighbors. First, I'm going to get some real simple facts out of the way, some real simple stats out of the way, because the far greater story than the numbers is going to be told by these folks. Ohio. Ohio is the 5th most prevalent human trafficking state in the country, behind California, Texas, and Florida, and recently surpassed by Michigan. A recent study found that there are approximately 3,100 of our Ohio neighbors that are being trafficked right now, today. The Summit and Stark makes up about just a little under 8% of the state's population, so I'm ballparking. But if we take that number down, that's about 242 of our neighbors here in Stark Summit that are being trafficked right now. Of those, 83% are women, So not all are women, but certainly the overwhelming majority are women. 86% are minors. Yeah, they're going after our kids. The average age of a girl who's trafficked is about 12 to 14. The average age of a boy who's trafficked is about 11 to 13. So the math is pretty simple, folks. We're talking about 7th, 8th, and 9th graders here. Human trafficking may soon pass drug addiction as the #1 criminal enterprise in the world. Why? Money. It's about money. And there's less risk than being a drug dealer. A drug dealer only gets to sell their drug one time, but a trafficker can sell a girl several times a day. It's not just men that are the perpetrators. Fact is 43% of the traffickers are women. Frankly, they make better recruiters. One doesn't have their guards up, perhaps, as much with a woman. Lastly, across the globe, Dr. Carl Ralston, a very good friend of mine, has shared that worldwide there are about 3,087 of our brothers and sisters each day that enter sex trafficking for the first time. That's 129 per hour. That's 2 per minute. So there's a lot of urgency, obviously, with what we're talking about here today. So with that, I'm going to start to my left and move to my right. I do have a brief introduction for each of our panelists that I'd like to share with you so you know who's speaking. And we're going to start with Hallie Koblenz from Rahab Ministries. Hallie's been employed with Rahab Ministries since May of 2015. Hallie serves as the Director of Minor Programming and has a bachelor's degree in Child and Family Development. Prior to serving as the Director of Minor Programming, she had the opportunity to provide case management services to survivors at Rahab's Adult and Minor Safe House. Part of her responsibility with Rahab includes overseeing the partnerships with Summit County and Cuyahoga County's specialized dockets for trafficked youth. Hallie loves building relationships with community partners, has an authentic desire to see everyone who is trapped in human trafficking to be freed. Hallie, can't thank you enough for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So as Tim said, my name is Hallie Koblenz. I'm the Director of Minor Programming with Rahab Ministries. In my department area, we work with youth who have either been identified as a victim or at high risk of being a victim. The youngest we've worked with is about 8 or 9, and then we work with youth all the way. If we get them when they're 16 or 17 and they turn 18 and want to continue services with us, we will continue working with them because we don't want to cut off that support while also trying to help transition them into more adult services with other community resources and throughout Rahab. We get our referrals from, we have a partnership with Summit County Juvenile Court for their Restore Court docket, as well as Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court for their Safe Harbor docket. And those are 2 specialized dockets in the state of Ohio that any kid who goes through the juvenile justice system, they are given a human trafficking screener, and if they're deemed as high risk or identified as a victim, then they are put on this diversion program. So that's where we get a lot of our referrals from, as well as from other community agencies, law enforcement, hospitals, children's services, et cetera. Today, I also kind of wanted to do a brief overview of HT 101 in the community and what it looks like, talk about types of trafficking. My department that works with youth, it's really important that we reach the youth because, as Tim said, the majority of victims are youth, and even adults who are in the life, they did not typically enter into the life when they were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's been since they were very young. They didn't grow up wanting that life, or even if they entered into it, they experienced trauma as a young kid that desensitized them to almost like prep them for the life. So to get into the different types of trafficking, there's a few types. I know when you hear about it or see it in movies like Hollywood, the movie Taken, other new movies, they show someone just being kidnapped off the streets and thrown into a white van and then thrown into the international sex trade. Of course, you should always be aware of your surroundings, and that might sometimes happen, but statistically, that is not how the majority of human trafficking happens. A lot of times it's with even someone you know, or a girl or boy falling in love with like an older boyfriend or girlfriend figure who kind of lures them into the life. So the grooming process would look like, we read a book one time at Rahab, and there was a guy talking about how he would recruit young girls into the life of trafficking. And he said he would go to a shopping mall and almost like catcall teenage girls who walked by. And he said if the girl just ignored him or made like a sassy comment and kept walking, he would know she wouldn't be an easy target. But if she was like shy and bashful or paid him attention, he would see like a vulnerability there and kind of go for her. And a lot of times we also see peer-to-peer trafficking, which an example could be a girl is at a party and she tapes her friend having sex with a guy and says, I need you to do XYZ for me, or I'm gonna show everyone this video. That's also a lot of times how that can start. We've seen familial trafficking. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is generational. If a mom or a dad is in the life, statistically, it's likely that their children also will be. And it's just unfortunately seen as normal to them. And there's a few things that make youth or people in general more vulnerable to trafficking. So for trafficking to occur, you need a vulnerable person, someone looking to exploit that vulnerability, and then you need a demand. And the demand would be the people who are buying these girls or boys for sex. And the vulnerable person would be someone who is targeted by the exploiter. And there's a few things we've seen that makes someone more vulnerable. So one, there's a test called the ACE factors, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it asks questions about like trauma you've experienced in your background as a child, and the higher your score is, the more likely you are to have like adverse experiences going forward in life. So these can look like growing up in a home with severe mental health issues, domestic violence, sexual, mental, emotional abuse, parents who are getting divorced, food insecurity, housing insecurity. But the two most common ones that we see are emotional neglect and sexual abuse. And the emotional neglect is because if you've been ignored your whole life or mistreated, not felt like your feelings matter, not feel like you matter, if someone comes along and says the opposite of what you've always heard, like, hey, I love you, I'll take care of you, I'm sorry you went through that, and if they're just saying that to later on exploit you, if you've never been told that your whole life, chances are you're probably going to believe them, and they're going to be able to slowly build up your trust. And then we also have the sexual abuse that we see in children. Unfortunately, if that happens from a young age, they become desensitized to it, and they may not even truly know that that's not normal because it happened from such a young age and they were desensitized. When it happens to them later in life, or a boyfriend or a trafficker does it to them, that just kind of becomes the norm to them, and they don't really think anything of it and how weird it is. So those are the things that we really see making youth in the community vulnerable. Where Rahab specifically comes in, our mentoring program, our goal is to kind of, so we can't completely eradicate trafficking in the community, or I guess we can, but our goal is to kind of remove those vulnerabilities with youth. So when we're mentoring them and building up healthy relationships with them, we want them to see their self-worth, one, and two, we believe that by building them up and them having that self-worth, we can kind of like help remove those vulnerabilities and model what healthy relationships look like so that they can easier recognize the counterfeits. And again, it's so important to reach the youth because most adults have either trauma that caused them to be in this life, or they were already in it when they were a kid. No one grows up wanting to be in this life, so spreading that education and community awareness for everyone in the community is so important. I tell parents a lot of the time to please monitor what your children do online. Human trafficking crimes have just skyrocketed as people have had more access to the internet unsupervised and on phones. It's a lot easier back before we had the internet as widely spread as it is now traffickers would have to be like in person talking to youth, and now they can just hide behind a screen. They can say they're a 16-year-old boy and make up whatever they want, and you would never know, and somehow lure children out of their homes. A lot of times, like those vulnerabilities that I talked about that make you more susceptible, they'll go through online profiles of pages that aren't blocked, and like they might see a kid post that they're sad their parents are getting divorced, and then right there they'll be like, okay, maybe that's a weakness I can exploit. Like, I'm gonna message them and see what they need. So it's really important to monitor what they're doing. I think that's everything. That's a brief overview of HT 101. I'd be happy to answer any questions after this, though.
Thank you, Hallie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hallie. I neglected to mention this is being live streamed for those of you that are joining us online. Thanks for joining us today. Hallie, one quick question for you. You talked a little bit about the access to children on the internet. Mm-hmm. Could you just briefly walk us through how that actually happens? I mean, what are some of the tricks, if you will, that are used to lure a child online?
Yeah, of course. We've seen a lot of times, and it can be on any social media platform, people are just not who they say they are, or sometimes even if they are, they'll just recruit kids online who they know are in a hard place and be like, hey, come meet me here. And if they don't have the parental supervision or support, and they can just leave the house, they'll go. And again, not having pages blocked, they'll literally go through and just look for someone who they think would be an easy target, and like look for kind of some of those vulnerabilities that I mentioned if people are posting things that should be private online, like issues in the home, issues with other family members, issues at school, anything like that. And then kids have also gotten creative. There's so many apps that are like you can disguise them, so even if like a parent or a teacher looks through your phone, you might not even know like what the kid is still doing. They've been really creative.
Thank you, Hallie, and thanks to you and your team at Rahab. That is many of you probably heard of Rahab Ministries. It's really one of the great bedrocks, I think, of our community. So thank you. Next, I get to introduce Teresa Merriweather. Teresa is a Elyria native. She recalls that her drive and passion for education was instilled in her at a young age by her parents, always encouraging her and her sisters to work hard, not expect a handout, lead, do not follow, and dream big. Anything possible if you work hard and stay focused. The American dream, that dream of becoming whatever my heart desired remained forever constant in my mind, quotes Merriweather. After graduating from Elyria High School in 1999, she started her journey to pursuing a college education. Initially, she pursued a career with hopes of becoming a neonatologist, but ultimately could not deny her innate and perpetual curiosity of the human psyche. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, minor in criminology, Master of Science in the Administration of Justice and Security, crime scene technician, CSI certification, and she has initiated the pursuing of a doctorate in business administration. Teresa successfully completed a fellowship in human trafficking, December of 2016. A survivor of sex trafficking herself, she is seated on the Global Alliance of Human Trafficking Task Force, representing the United States of America, and also the Ohio Attorney General's Human Trafficking Commission's Legal and Legislative Committee. She is published author of the Child Trafficking Prevention Framework, post-COVID-19, that is being provided to agencies and organizations across the world. In choosing to follow her career path, Ms. Merriweather learned that it is vital to treat life similar to that of a crime scene investigation. As a crime scene investigator, you must be able to not only secure the scene itself, but have the ability to quickly recognize, collect, and preserve the evidence needed to link a suspect to the crime. Likewise, you must be able to secure your future by recognizing that life is serious and collect all the knowledge available to you while still persevering your individuality to serve your community. There indeed are a lot of steps that we need to climb in life, But one thing that I know, says Teresa, is that through hard work, determination, and my dedication, a clear path to success and personal gratification can be fully realized. Meriwether trains all over the country on human trafficking awareness. She has future plans of leading a nonprofit organization in both the U.S. and Nigeria, dedicating to rescuing and restoring victims of human trafficking. Folks, I could go on, but I ran out of paper. Teresa Meriwether, I'm blessed to also call you a good friend. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for the audience for coming and listening. I don't really care about all the acclimates and degrees that I hold. One thing that is the main thing about me is I'm a survivor. I survived what was meant to kill me. And I tell people, I was freed from something for something. Every day getting up on purpose to save and prevent others from being trafficked. I'm an adult survivor of human trafficking. It happened to me at the age of 31 years old. I am 42 years old right now. My trafficker was my ex-fiance. He was also a pastor of a church. So for me, one thing with me is I tell people I was educated before I was trafficked. And one of the things that I found, and I had to go back, you have to go back and figure out, where did my vulnerability come from? I came from a dysfunctional family. My mom, she made a lot of money at Ford Motor Company. She was in management, educated. And my father was a truck driver. But he was an alcoholic and a drug user, and he was abusive. My father never told me how beautiful and smart I was. So Memphis was able to tell me for the wrong reason. And so I tell people, tell your daughters how beautiful and smart they are before someone else. I don't say, when I talk in general, I don't say, it was for me, so that another man will tell me for another reason. No, another person. Because as Tim stated, that traffickers are also females. All right, so 43% of traffickers are females. People think it's just males. So another person. So there was the vulnerability for me. Growing up in that house of dysfunction, my mom hid it well because we had everything, like I grew up in a privileged home. But underneath it, there was trauma. And so later on, I was diagnosed in my early 20s with anxiety disorder with PTSD. One of the things that I did was I utilized the books in school, and I got in a lot of trouble because I used to daydream. The daydreaming was my way of escape from the reality of what's going on at home, that dysfunctional and abuse with my father. And so I got the diagnosis, and my doctor put me on a drug called Xanax, which you guys probably are familiar with, and I took it per requested need. And it's scored, meaning you can cut it in half. So later on in my career, I worked in mental health, and then later on I went and I wanted to work with people that were involved in the justice system, that was possibly, using drugs and committing crimes, as a result of trauma, mental health. And so we know that crime mimics mental health and mental health mimics crime, all right? So I became a parole officer. I moved to another state, was a parole officer. And before I could become a parole officer, part of my physical examination stuff, they found that I took Xanax. So I had to get off of Xanax, and they put me on a pill called Atarax. So it's like an antihistamine, so per requested need. And so it's a capsule form. So moving forward, later on, I moved back home from being a parole officer, and I got in a bad car accident, and then I was going to church, and I don't push religion off on anyone. And so at this church, the head pastor, she had this male, she was a female, had this male pastor that would preach and stuff, the sermon when she wasn't available. So I started going to, church and going to the Bible study on Wednesdays, and afterwards, I'm asking, a lot of questions, with the scholarly mentality like me, it's hard to really get something where I, really want to be attentive to. But I started I'm trying to understand things a lot more with this Bible. So I started asking, just so happened, the guy questions. Later on, it leads to me and him engaging more, in conversation outside of church and things. And then later on, we started dating. He was older than me, and he was an executive also of a major company. And later on, I'm dating him and get engaged to him. He went ahead and with the PTSD, sometimes I'm reliving it, so it takes me a little bit of time, guys. Bear with me, get out with my story. He taught me into relocating to Louisville, Kentucky with him, and I did. And like my family and friends were like, Teresa, he's a pastor. You're not supposed to cohabitate, before marriage. But you couldn't tell Teresa nothing, So he wined and dined me. He bought me lots of gifts, gave me lots of money, stuff like that. So I relocated with him. And when I got there, things changed. He ended up, because he had been married before, he'd tell me like, Teresa, don't take you shouldn't take you shouldn't put lingerie on and stuff. He said, after my showers, I took him a lot of times at night, he was able to sleep naked or, with a towel on. But things were becoming way different. He hit my wallet, so I couldn't have I couldn't have my form of my identification. I needed to get refills on my medication soon after the 90-day supply was over. The doctor would only refill my prescription across state lines, one time or so. So anyway, I couldn't get to the doctors. He took and he put the Daypray gel Rufinol in my Love Sweet Tea, in my sweet tea. So roofied me, in my Atarax, that capsule form fill that I was still taking per request, and it was no longer Atarax. He put like the benzos and stuff in it, your Percocets, Oxycontin and stuff in it. So I'm high all day. And he allowed the Johns to come in, the buyers, and have sex with me. And he sold me. And so I wake up sometimes, I got semen in between my breasts and pain in my vaginal area. So when I was able to finally get away from that, man, I wanted to commit suicide. Especially when the psychiatrists, and them told me they were detoxing me, told me all the drugs that was in my system. I dealt with the shame, the guilt. How did this happen to me? Also working, having a previous background in mental health and then working in law enforcement, it's just like, man, I failed myself and I was so smart. I'm so smart, but I'm stupid. That's the thoughts that ran through my head, and they kept me sick. And so my psychiatrist and psychiatric team told me, Teresa, your life isn't spinning on a dime. God's gonna use you to save many lives. And so I had a problem with God. I said, well, God, why did he allow this to happen to me? And also a man that was a licensed minister or pastor, he allowed this to happen. But now I look back, and everything in my life that occurred has brought me to today, and why my life is dedicated to preventing others from being trafficked and rescuing others from out of the life of trafficking. And so, like I said, I didn't want anyone to know. And my psychiatric team are like, Teresa, you're only as sick as your secret. And people will come up to me after I get done training. They're like, did something like this happen to you or someone that you love? And I'd be like, no, I would lie, because I was only as sick as my secret. But I realized that in order to help others, I had to take off the mask and go ahead and tell my story and let others know that who are maybe in the audience that you're not alone. This happened to me too. And also to help prevent people from being trafficked. People think that only youth and children are trafficked. I'm an adult survivor. And then I just helped with a recent operation in another county where my training was a catalyst for a rescue operation. That I saw, the oldest I saw was a 72-year-old woman that was recovered, that was having to work that was being trafficked in the massage parlors. She's dealing with the sex work she had to do and the labor. So it's not just children and youth, adults and elderly. Like me and my colleagues were talking about this morning at breakfast, and I was stating that human trafficking is like COVID. It doesn't have a specific victim, So as I said, I was free for something, for something. So what I do, a lot of times, I have a training program, Traffic Lives Matter Hand in Hand. I'm also a State of Ohio continuing education provider for your RNs, LPNs, for the Ohio Board of Nursing, community health workers, real estate agents, teachers, and I also go into the classrooms, and I put the kids in the situation of human trafficking through the use of simulations. And I teach them what human trafficking is, and healthy versus unhealthy relationships as well. In some of the classrooms that I've been in, I've had like one student in North Carolina, I also trained in North Carolina. One student ran out of my classroom when we got to one part of my simulation, and she told the counselor, she said, that woman, when she was referring to me, she said, she's talking about my life. Her mom was trafficking her. Then I had another student come up to me after training, and her eyes were welled up with tears, and she's like, she says, she gave me this elaborate story. And I said, is this story about you? And she says, it is. And so I was able to help her. Then I have students when I train, after I leave out the classroom, they throw notes at me. I'm a victim of human trafficking. A lot of them don't know what it is and what's going on. And people don't believe parents traffic their kids for drugs and money. you know? As now, I signed the contract with the State of Ohio Department of Children's Services, so I'm training all the children's services agencies throughout the state of Ohio, the Adult Protective Services agencies, and adoptive and foster care parents. And so one of the things is if you're not trained properly through motivational interviewing skills and the techniques to extract the human trafficking part from a client, then that is going to be your next person, that next kid who's already on drugs or going to turn to drugs and going to be going in and out of prison later on because they're still dealing with that part of being trafficked that they did not get out. So it's me training a lot of the law enforcement as well and the children's service agency how to extract that information out. And that's going to, that part with the trafficking will keep them sick. And so, I'll give to, if you guys give your email to Tim right here, I'll make sure that you receive the Rethinking Primary Prevention of Child Trafficking that I authored, that's in the American Journal of Ortho Psychiatry, dealing with prevention. But I'm welcome to any questions afterwards. And thank you, Tim, for having me, and thank you guys for being here.
Remember what I said about these folks being heroes. I mean, Teresa, you're definitely one of my heroes. We hear a lot in human trafficking that there's a grooming process. And clearly, sadly, that's what happened with your situation. Teresa, could you comment, though, for us a little bit, just from an awareness standpoint? You think about the grooming process that takes place, starting with the targeting and then ending in control. Could you just comment briefly of some things to be aware of there?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of Hallie? Yeah. Hallie, with regards with onlining. And I tell parents that if you purchase those gaming devices, such as like the PS4, Xboxes and stuff, and you see the kids with they have the headsets and stuff you're playing with, you want to make sure that that kid is trained on human trafficking awareness, or as well, or you're making, if they're not trained, you need to make sure that you know who they're playing with. And also on social media, a lot of the kids, they go ahead and confirm friends on like Facebook and stuff with people that they don't even know. They go ahead and accept a friend request because they want to increase their likes when they post their status. And like I tell them, every like isn't a good like. Traffickers are opportunists. They take advantage of the online platform. And so at any given time, there's over 50,000 pedophiles. Traffickers are pedophiles. At any given time, there's over 50,000 of them on those high technological gaming devices and social media platforms. They're not on there for the sake of socially engaging with your kids. They're not on there for the sake of playing that game. They're on there for the sake of trying to separate the kids from the parents and loved ones. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention with that. Mental health, all right? People who are affected by mental illness, and we use the verbiage affected by mental illness, you never want to say that someone is mentally ill. Mental illness shows them they didn't choose mental illness. So a person that's affected by mental illness, there's a high vulnerability for them being trafficked as well. So you want to make sure with, you're protecting even more those that are your family or loved one that may be affected by mental illness, because traffickers play on that vulnerability.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Next, I get to introduce Carly Gardner. Carly is a local survivor here in Greene. She's 24 years old and has a 4-year-old son. Carly works full-time as a esthetician. I say that without a lisp, I'm doing well. Esthetician. And is going to school to pursue her aspirations in real estate. Carly, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, good morning. My name is Carly, and I'll start off by saying this is my first time being able to share my experience outside of a courtroom, and I'm very thankful I get to do so. Like Tim said, I'm 24 years old, and I work as an esthetician. I also go to school and full-time for real estate, and I have a 4-year-old little boy. I also went to Manchester until my junior and senior year, where I attended the Portage Lakes Career Center for cosmetology. I graduated in 2018, and shortly after I had my little boy. I started saving up money and eventually bought a house in 2020. I thought my life was perfect. Everything was working out just the way I wanted it to. Right around my 21st birthday, I received an Instagram message from a man named Andy, asking if I would be interested in doing a photo shoot. He explained he was a newer photographer and wanted to build his portfolio. He had worked with a few people I knew, so I felt like I could trust him. I was so excited at first, but as the days led up to the shoot, I had a terrible feeling about it, and I tried to back out. Andy wouldn't take no for an answer, and I ultimately did it. Afterwards, he said he wanted to continue to be friends, and I agreed. We talked quite a bit, and he was very kind, but his attitude started to change when I was slow responding to his messages. At that point, I distanced myself, and that's when I started receiving text messages from a number that I did not recognize and an ad on Snapchat from somebody named Joey. At this point, I wasn't aware that this was Andy hiding behind a phone screen, saying that he was someone else. When I tried to block the numbers in the Snapchat, he threatened me until I would add him back. This went on for a few months, and in those months, I did not tell anyone what was going on. I was scared of him because I didn't know who was messaging me from the fake numbers, and I didn't know what he was capable of doing. He knew where I lived and worked and pretty much knew where I was at all times, even when I wouldn't tell anyone where I was going. During this time, I would go places with my friends and try and get my mind off of it. He always knew where I was and what I was doing when I was there. I remember receiving a message while having dinner with my friends, and he told me what I ordered looked great. I didn't know how he knew what I was doing at all times. I stayed calm around my friends since they didn't know, but inside I was panicking. How did he know everything about my life the second it was happening? Those few months were the worst months of my life. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone, and I ended up losing a lot of friends due to the change in my behavior. I felt depressed, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder everywhere I went because I felt like he was always watching me. From the time I woke up in the morning to the time I went to sleep at night, I constantly had to talk to him, or else he would threaten me. My life was consumed by Andy and the amount of fear and pain he caused me. He would tell me I was worthless and would tear down my self-confidence to the point of no return. The things he would say to me will forever be burned into my memory, even though I know he only did it to hurt me. Once I put two and two together, I realized that Joey was Andy using burner phones and a fake Snapchat. I told my roommate and her boyfriend about what was going on. Then Andy showed up at my house. He knocked on my door, and I grabbed my son and my roommate, and I hid in her room until he went away. I called the police, and that's when I filed my first report about him. Time went on, and nothing got better. He still constantly threatened me when I would refuse to send him nude photos and videos of myself. He was never satisfied, and he wanted me to send him explicit videos of myself with someone having sex. At this point, I was pretty sure that Joey was Andy, but I constantly second-guessed myself and convinced myself it was not him. Joey had requested that the man in the explicit video that I had to send was Andy. Andy knew about this and set up plans for me to come to his apartment and take the video. I told him I didn't want to, but Joey had threatened me and told me that I had until 11 o'clock that night to send him the videos. He threatened to send the nude photos and videos of myself to my parents and kept saying, "Don't you love your son?" as another threat. I felt like I had no other choice but to have sex with Andy and send the video of it to Joey. I drove to his apartment and I told him I didn't want to do it, but I felt like I had no other choice. We took the video and did what Joey had requested. Andy made me watch the video back after, even though I didn't want to. I felt uncomfortable and ashamed because I didn't want to do it in the first place. He became angry and told me we had to watch it to make sure it was okay. I would look away, but he would shove the screen in my face until I watched it in its entirety. Afterwards, Andy made me a drink and wouldn't let me leave until I finished it because he said he wanted to spend time with me. I drank it and left as quickly as I could, and I cried the rest of the night. Even though I consented to go through with the video, I felt extremely violated, and I felt like if I didn't have sex with Andy, he would hurt me or my family. As if things weren't bad enough, a few weeks later, he sent a nude photo of me to my boss at work and tried to get me fired. Due to the photo, I was written up and suspended for 5 days. Shortly after, Andy gained access to my Snapchat and sent the nude photo of me to everyone that I worked with at the time. That's when I filed a second police report and tried getting help. This is also when Andy stopped messaging me and when Joey also stopped messaging me. Since then, I'm just trying to get work on back to normal. There were days that I thought about suicide because I felt like my life was ruined because of him. This is an experience that will always affect me in a negative way. I've tried to explain how I felt during the experience and how I feel now, but I can never put it into words. I was 21 when everything happened, and I didn't know the best way to handle the situation. I just wish somebody could see what I went through and what the other victims went through, because this experience really took a toll on my mental health. There were 7 other survivors that he had done similar things to, one being a 13-year-old girl. I never thought something like this could ever happen to me, especially where I was from. Growing up, I always felt safe, but after this experience, I now know it can happen to anyone, no matter where you live. I was trying the best to be a mom to my 1.5-year-old son and always make sure he was fed, as well as making sure dinner was always on the table for my roommates, all while Andy was constantly messaging me and degrading me, making me feel worthless. I felt terrible in my own skin because of him, and that is when I really started getting into tattoos. I wanted to change everything about me because I didn't want to look the way that I did when all of this happened. I wanted to be someone else. When I received a phone call from the police a year later saying they wanted me to share my experience about Andy, I was more than happy to do so because I didn't feel safe knowing that he had the freedom to start messaging me again at any second. I was so scared knowing that Andy had my address that I ended up selling my house after only living in it for less than a year. I feared him every day, and I still do, even though I know he can't hurt me anymore. I don't think that fear will ever go away. Sextortion happens all around this area, and I never knew it could happen to me, but it really can happen to anybody here. Thank you for letting me share my experience and taking the time to listen, and thank you, Tim, for inviting me. Thank you.
Carl, your courage and your strength, there aren't even words. I'm not even going to pretend to try and come up with the words. But your voice today is just amazing.
Thank you.
For everyone here, for everyone who's live streaming, for everyone, thank you for just sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Amazing. Carl, you've got a tough act to follow, my friend. Very pleased to introduce Mr. Carl Ralston. Carl has been married to his wife, Lori, for over 30 years. He has a bachelor's degree in business management from Malone University and has since obtained his master's and doctorate degrees as well. For years, prior to Remember New, Carl owned an insurance agency here in Portage Lakes area, in the Summit County area. Remember New was conceived in 2003 to 04 after Carl was attending a conference in Thailand. After hearing the story of another victim of sex trafficking, the speaker then told of a young girl whose name was New. She was a 12-year-old girl at the time, and it was known that a family member had sold her virginity. At the time, the missionary did not know what had become of New. It was in that moment that Carl felt inspired by God with two words: remember New. And in that December of 2003, Carl committed that he would do everything in his power to eliminate the use of children in the sex trade industry around the world. Starting in 2004, Carl began looking for New. After 6 trips to Cambodia to look for her, he found her in July of 06, when New was 17. That meeting would forever change the course of Carl and New's lives. Carl and Lori Ralston welcomed New into their own family, and she was given a father and a mother who could always love and support her. Not only that, but New also became Remember New's first official employee. Today, Carl serves as founder and president of Remember New, which was officially and formally established in 2005. The organization's focus is ending child sex slavery through prevention. Currently, 110 homes in 17 countries, where over 1,500 children are currently protected from being sold. To date, and including past graduates, it's estimated that Remember New has prevented over 2,340 children from sex slavery. In May of 16, Carl experienced one of the greatest joys of his life, walking New down the aisle. He had the honor of handing New over in marriage to a man of God as a free woman by her own choice. New's story of redemption had come full circle. And Carl's dream is that this would become the story of thousands of children around the world who would have otherwise been sold into slavery. Carl, thanks for being here.
Thank you. You did a better job of telling the story than I can do, so I should probably just pass the mic to Kwame and save time. No, I'll pick up some different spots from there. A little bit about myself. I was 13 years old, very close to my mom, And unfortunately, she passed away when I was 13, and she was just 35 years old. And a couple of months after that, the man across the street from me molested me. So I was a very angry young man just when I had turned 14 years old, turned to drinking and some other stuff that I shouldn't have done, and kind of lived life for myself for quite a while until I was about 28 years old. And after that, got involved in a local church, actually here in Green Township, Calvary Bible Church, a long time ago. And my life changed a lot. I went on a trip to Russia in about the year 2000. I wanted to give to what they were doing, helping children. And I wanted to see it because I was pretty skeptical of the church at that point because of a lot of things pastors had done and corruption and stuff. And it broke my heart. We went in 3 orphanages in Siberia that had about 600 children each, and they each had about 6 workers. This is Siberia, and not one of those children had boots, gloves, and a hat. They would have 2 of the 3, but not all 3. I found out that when the day they turned 18, they sent them away. The government gave them about a 6 by 12 concrete block cubicle with no furniture, and most of those children turned to trafficking or selling drugs or thievery, and broke my heart that I couldn't do anything to help them. I didn't know what to do, and I tried, but I couldn't. I say all of that because I think God used all of that to lead me to Remember New. And so I've always had a passion for victims. Carly's story breaks my heart. And I know Teresa, and she's a friend, and her story breaks my heart as well. So that was part of the driving force for me. In November of 2003, hardly anyone had heard of child sex trafficking or the fact that they would put children as young as 3 years old in locked rooms as sex slaves. It boggled my mind. And I knew I did have to do something about it. I had a local business here in the Manchester area, an insurance agency on Route 93. It was very successful, and I had a very easy life, but I knew I couldn't keep living that. And so I did commit till the day I died. I would do everything to try and stop this to happening to children around the world. And sold our business in 2007, started working full-time with Remember New. And it has been amazing because of people like all of you. The majority of our sponsors are people that sponsor children and give us anywhere from $20 to $60 a month. That provides for all the needs of our children. And we're a little different in that I learned early on the trauma from child sex trafficking is almost unrecoverable to get away from that. So it was put on my heart to do prevention. So we go to villages where children are sold, and we offer scholarships to the children that are at risk. Some of the other panelists talked about risk factors. We know if a child has a sex trafficking victim in their family, if they're alcoholics, drug addicts, if they're gamblers, if there's debt, big health problems with a family member, that a lot of times those children are at risk. We'll offer them a scholarship, and so we're able to prevent them from being taken by the traffickers in the countries around the world that we work in. We're in 19 countries around the world, 7 of them in Africa, and then coming across in Asia, several countries, South America, and then over in Europe like Ukraine and Moldova and Albania and Romania. And I want to tell you one of the recent ones we opened up in. We always wanted to be in Brazil because they're one of the 5 worst countries for trafficking in the world. Thailand, Brazil, Cambodia, the Philippines, and India are the 5 worst, not in the correct order. I did that research a while ago, and I forget the order, but those are the 5 countries. But Brazil has always eluded us until this year. I went there on a fact-finding tour, interviewed 15 people that were doing things to help children in trafficking, and most of them were intervention, they were going in and getting the children out. But the last person that spoke was actually a high school teacher, and she had created this comic book. And they went into the schools with this comic book, and this describes about bad touch. It starts there with where people shouldn't touch you as a child, and it ends with how you know if you're about to be trafficked in sexual trafficking. And they actually read the book to me. It is in Portuguese, and it was exactly what I've been looking for to do prevention in schools. And so far, since February of this year, we've introduced this. We've bought kits. They get the comic book, which is really well done. Kids love it. And they get a little rubber bracelet for a reminder and a little pendant. And then they get trafficking training of anywhere from 5 days, 45 minutes a day, to 1 day, 45 minutes at an assembly, depending on how much time the school gives us to train them. We've paid for 8,000 of those kits and have many more on the way, I believe. We've got some donors that are interested in that. And the reason this excited me so much is I was speaking about 7 or 8 years ago out in the Pacific Northwest at a conference, and a 16-year-old girl asked me what I was doing in America. And I had got that question several times, and the answer was nothing. And it broke my heart. I'm from America. I want to help here the most. But with child services and counselors and policemen and relatives and schools, it's pretty hard to figure out how to do prevention here in America. And I've been looking for something like this to be able to teach the kids how to do prevention. And part of the deal that I struck with the school teacher is she agreed that if we funded as much schooling as she could teach in Brazil, that she would let us translate this into any language, including English. So we're in the process of doing that, and I hope for the spring semester that we will start doing prevention in America, and I think it's going to be very effective because, like some of the other people have said, the key is teaching people how to avoid being trafficked. And this booklet in the 45 minutes of teaching is a great way to do that. And so maybe it would warm my heart immensely if Summit County was the first place we opened that up in. So I invite the people of Greene to contact me. I've got business cards out in the back and a little just general brochure about Remember New. And we're going to be ready to do this at an assembly type forum or in the classroom in the spring semester. And that's the story of Remember New. I have many children around the world that I love with all of my heart, and I have the best job in all of the world because I take children who are in very dangerous situations, and we're able to get them out and give them a life that they've never even dreamed of. And I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. Thank you for your time.
Well, with regard to your new project, I can only confidently say this: whatever obstacles stand in the way, they're about to get mowed over.
Awesome.
I would ask this, Carl, your commitment to this cause has largely to do with prevention. And the new initiative that you're looking to roll out here locally, what age group are you thinking is a good target to start that?
This comic book is written for a junior high age and up. They've rolled it out to 6th grade through high school. the high schoolers got a hold of it and said, hey, we want this. And they said, oh, no, it's a junior high version. And they said, we don't care. It's really good. It's important. But now they've written it from 6th grade all the way through high school. I don't have the high school one here because they did it after I left, but it'll be ready.
So the mission is junior high and high school.
Yep.
Look out, Carl's coming. With that, I get to move on to Kwame. And very grateful, Kwame, that you're able to join us today. Kwame's actually from this area. I'll let him share with you his roots. He is a speaker, consultant, and anti-trafficking advocate. As a survivor, he understands the tragic impact of human trafficking all around us. His lived experience shaped his career and interests, which led him to advocate for policies that assist victims as they navigate life after being trafficked. Break the Chain was a documentary that featured Kwame. The film shows how human trafficking goes unnoticed in our own backyards. Break the Chain was created to provide a reliable and educational entertainment resource for use in training and community awareness events across the United States. Kwame is currently a board member of Not for Sale, One Step at a Time, an organization that raises awareness and provides hope to communities throughout Ohio, America, and the world. President Trump appointed Kwame to the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking in December of 20. The Justices for Victims of Trafficking Act, the JVTA, enacted in May of 2015, established the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, which provides a formal platform for trafficking survivors to advise and make recommendations on federal anti-trafficking policies to the President's interagency. Task Force to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, the PITF, Kwame partnership with Blue Campaign, the federal government, NGOs, and service providers as a consultant. Kwame was awarded the 2023 Gillen Massey Award, Trapped: Lesson from the Trenches. Finally, Kwame's goal is to raise awareness, reduce the risk of male victimization, educate members of the government and the general public, and advocate for victim protection and wellness. Kwame earned a Bachelor of Science of Education from Walsh University. His ultimate goal is to work for the federal government, rescuing and protecting victims from human trafficking. He believes that with God's assistance, he will be able to defeat the heinous crime against human life. Kwame, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you again for having me, Tim, and the City of Green. I'm very grateful and honored to be here, and I appreciate each one of you and value each one of you. Oh, wow, it's an honor. 2006, I was 7 years old. I grew up in a small country in Africa called Togo. It's next to Ghana, Benin, Sierra Leone, Nigeria. It's a very small country. It's about the size of Maryland. I'm one of the oldest of 7, so my parents didn't get the education they wanted growing up, because in my country, one of the things you have to understand is that public school, private school, you have to pay for it. It's not like here where many kids take it for granted, they don't want to go to school. So my parents didn't get a chance to go to school. They barely finished 2nd grade. But they loved us, They got married and they had 7 kids. I'm the oldest. And we are farmers. We do sharecropping. So that's the life I grew up with. And anytime I get a chance to go to school, it's like a prepaid. I don't know if you guys remember those prepaid phones. You use the card and then you use it and then you got to pay again. That's how school was for me. If my dad sent me to school, I have to pay for that day. $5, $10, whatever that is. Once that money runs out, they send me back home. So school is very hard to be part of in my country. So my father had a friend, and we have this guy. It's a family friend. He is well known through the city that I grew up in Togo. I don't know who he is. I have never met him. But the good thing about him is that he has traveled throughout the country, all over Europe, here. He's a tennis player. He's just well known. He's very good. He's just well entertainment person. Everybody loved him. So he made a promise to my parents. So he eventually landed here in the U.S., in Michigan. And so while he was here, he started to, I don't know what got him interested in doing this, but he decided that he's going to bring kids here to the country and file for asylum seeking. So he applied for that visa called asylum. So asylum is basically when you are fleeing from religious persecution or war or something in those three orders. It has to be one of those three that will grant you the asylum process. So he was able to file for that and then brought 4 kids here, me including. So there were 4 of us, 2 young kids. I was only 7. Because he made a promise to my parents that he would give me that education that I have always wanted, and they also wanted. So I was happy. They were happy. Everybody's happy. Because I'm going to school. I'm going to a country where I'll live the American dream. And that's what my parents want from me. They want me to have a good life. So I can provide for them. And that's just what is expected of me. As a 7 years old. So I came without knowing who this person is. And prior to that, this guy always sent me stuff. He always sent me toys and things that I don't really need, but he always sent them to me because he was living in the U.S., so he has idea to send me stuff. So now that I know more about trafficking, that was grooming. I didn't know that. That's the crazy thing about this life is that you don't know you are in it until you realize what's going on after you left. So for the longest time, just like, oh, these are good gifts. My parents like it, and I play with these toys are great. I play with my friends, and my sisters. We enjoyed it, and so when the time came in 2006, in February, that's when I left my country for the first time to come to the U.S. That's the first time I met my trafficker. I didn't even know that he was I didn't know that's why this was going to happen to me. I just know he's going to be the person I'm going to be with, and he's going to protect me, send me to school, and I get to call my parents whenever I want. Well, let me tell you, that never happened. The day I landed in Detroit airport and I met this man, I realized right away, this is not good. I had this gut feeling that this man is out to get me. And I was right. For 6 years of my life, I was locked up, starved, I was malnourished, I didn't have any clothing. This guy abused us physically, mentally, psychologically, you name it all. He brainwashed me to the point where he was all I can depend on. And that's what traffickers are good at. They will brainwash you, they'll control you with psychological method, emotional, everything. They will use it against you. And that's exactly what my trafficker did for me and the 3 other kids. I have nowhere to go. I couldn't leave. I know some of you are thinking, well, you should run away. Well, again, I'm from a different country. I don't know English that well. I don't have a parents here. I don't have anybody here, so I can't run away. So let me just save you, if you want to ask that question, let me save you time for that. I couldn't run away. I just couldn't. Who is going to save me? Who is going to protect me? Again, my trafficker has brainwashed me where the FBI, the school, anyone who is authority are the enemy. So there is no way I will ever run away. If I do, this is what he tells us. They will deport you back home and you bring shame to your family. I don't want to bring shame to my family, so I stayed. I do whatever he asked me to do. The summertime are the worst. I work. I was a full-time student and a full-time working for my trafficker. I didn't have any friends. I couldn't play any sport. I go to school and I come home. School, home, work. Everything was calculated from the moment I wake up until I go to sleep. He was controlling that much. He calls the school every hour to check on 4 kids, if they are there, if we are there, if we are there. Every hour. Nobody knows this was happening. Nobody picked up the sign. This was all happening from 2006 until 2013 when I was graduating from middle school. That's when my middle school teacher, one of them, realized this kid was not acting like his classmates. And she took an action to reach out to me and say, how can I help you? That's all it takes. How can I help you? The simple, hi, how can I help you? Changed my life until now. That was the beginning of the journey to leave my trafficker. And I'm very grateful, and I'm really thankful for God for sending me that woman, that teacher, and she's still part of my life to this day. She put everything on life for me. She put her life, her job on the line for me so I can get a better life. My trafficker threatened her so many times, but she never gives up on me. She is my hero. I made it through. I found my way. I came to Ohio. I went to high school, finished high school, ended up here in North Canton, go to Walsh, got a degree in education because of that teacher. She have instilled in me that work of service to work with kids. And I work with kids with special needs for 2 years after I graduated from college. And I ended up in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I'm resigning right now. And I worked there for 2 years. And after that, I decided it's a better thing for me to do in that to get involved in this movement of trafficking. It's just so much needs to be done, especially when it comes to what happened to me is called labor trafficking. I was smuggled into here, and then I was then abused. Then I was doing labor work at the same time. So there's so much facet to what happened to me that I'm still learning to this day. It never ends. The trauma is still there. I can never escape that. The PTSD is still there. Even though I have two boys now, I fear for my own self sometimes because of what my trafficker have done to me. I don't want to hurt my kids. I don't want to hurt my wife, because these are things that have happened to me in the past, and I'm trying so hard to not fall into that deep, deep evil. This trauma never goes away. It never will. It's part of my life. It's part of my life for the rest of my life, and I will die with it because of one man's greed. And it's very sad that we are still dealing with this to this day. This crime of trafficking, slavery, is still happening. We have to put an end to it. And this is why we are here. This is why we are all sitting here this time, this moment, to discuss how we can help each other out. So I'm so grateful to be here, Tim. Thank you for having me. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know it's kind of brief, but I'm happy to answer any question later.
No doubt, no doubt. You know, one of the old sayings that perhaps all of us has heard is not what happens to us in life, it's what we choose to respond to it. And Kwame, that is one of the many things that comes to my mind just, again, hearing your story. And I just, we're all blown away by how you've taken action on so many fronts, and your heart is just on fire to continue to do more. And we can't thank you enough for that. I had one follow-up question. You've really gotten involved in the political system. And a lot of times, I have to admit myself, I'm a little skeptical as to whether or not they're genuinely interested in doing anything about the cause. Could you care to comment on that for us?
Yeah, so the 2 years I was involved with the the grant, with the federal government working, trying to advise, Congress on, some ways that they can do better job. We all know, the government is very slow on things. Many times, we were required, so there were 11 cohort, survivors who are part of this panel. So every year we have to come up with reports. And that report, according to Congress, we have to give them advice, recommendations, and things that we see that they can do better job on. So that's what we did. So the federal government is doing what they can, but again, everything is very slow. It's said that they don't take an action as quick as they should in this movement. One of the things that we ran into was that our Secretary of State continuously used a phrase that we did not want him to use, that sex work. They want to illegalize sex work, and that's something that we fought against when we were part of the council. But again, he was not listening. He continued to want to legalize sex work, and as a part of the council, we were just not very happy with it, and there's nothing we can do. So we did our best we can to fight against it, but it's something that the government, the federal government right now is trying to release that kind of idea that sex work is an actual job, and that people should go ahead and do that. And as we know, sex work is not really a job, because somebody's paying for that, and that is not good. It's a labor also, because you are using your body to pay for, it's disgusting to think about. So the Secretary of State has not followed through with us yet on that. We wrote him many letters trying to convince him not to use those languages like sex work in their reports or PITF reports, but they continue to use them. So it's still a lot of work to be done at the federal level, a lot of work to be done. They are very slow, and they aren't quick to do anything except if it meet their agenda. So it's quite sad. Yeah.
But thank you for being our voice.
Yeah.
Thank you for being our voice. Well, we're doing really well. We're right on schedule with time, so we will have a little bit of time again for some Q&A here. Next, I get to introduce Melissa Brown. Melissa Brown is wife and mother of 2 adult children. Her work history is working in management. With the leadership skills she used in managing 18 stores, she carried those over to her role as the executive director at a large multi-site church. She has a proven history of exceeding goals and helping to get the best out of a team that she's working with. Melissa first heard about human trafficking 9 years ago. She attended the Catalyst Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a sold-out event with 13,000 people in attendance. After returning from a lunch break inside the arena, they had placed white umbrellas on random chairs. A lady came on stage and asked those who had an umbrella in their seat to stand up and open it. Across the full arena, people began to stand up and open their umbrellas. It was a sight that still burns in Melissa's memory. The woman on stage began to talk about how each person holding an umbrella represented someone who would be trafficked in that city that day. She talked about girls who were being sold as a commodity. Melissa was shocked, and her heart was instantly broken. And she began to ask herself, how could this happen? And how could the innocence of children be stolen and sold to make money? Upon returning to Ohio, Melissa began to investigate human trafficking, asking, does it happen in Ohio? If so, where? Who are the good guys fighting this? The answer was, yes, it happens in Ohio, and to her surprise, it was hidden in plain sight. Ohio ranks number 5, reported cases of human trafficking in the country. Melissa began to look into who helps, and she began to volunteer in organizations that are making a difference. She mentored 2 survivors and currently sits on the Stark County Juvenile Human Trafficking Task Force. She began to work alongside of those making an impact while also knowing the need is great and there is so much work that needs to be done. Melissa lives by the belief that she has been placed on earth for such a time as this, to help her make an impact in the fight against evil. She knows that God has blessed her with a voice to speak up and to fight for those who cannot speak for themselves. She fearlessly believes that God who is who he says he is, and she faces life's giants with boldness and faith. Her desire is to do all things with a pure heart and always speak the truth with love. Melissa wants her legacy to not be about what she has done, but rather who she has served. Thank you for being here, Melissa.
Thank you. Such an honor to, I get emotional thinking of, walking through everybody and all the things that they presented. It's unbelievable, the panel that's up here. When you talk about human trafficking, there's a lot of misconceptions. That's the biggest thing. That's why I think it's been able to run rampant, is because it's such an evil, and we think it will look evil and dark, but it doesn't. It hides in plain sight. When Hallie was talking about social media, that is the biggest way that kids are engaging with people that they don't know. Every teenager in America has one of these. Every teenager. On average, kids are getting their cell phones at the age of 10. I understand it. Parents, they're working and their kids are going after school, to someone's house or going to a sporting practice or whatever, and parents want direct contact with their kids. Totally get that. But there's not really something known as a dumb phone anymore, right? They're all smartphones. And they're so smart that they allow you to engage in ways that a lot of parents just don't even really think about, honestly. Hollywood does portray trafficking as druggings and kidnappings. That's a lot of it, but that's not all of it. With social media has been incredible because it's allowed you to stay connected with people that you wouldn't have been able to connect with before. Like when I was growing up, there was a thing called stranger danger. That's not a thing at all anymore. And if you had a friend that moved away, unless you really took their address and you started becoming pen pals, you were just, have a good life. That was just the reality. With social media, I have friends that have moved to Florida and their kids are growing up and they're going to homecomings, and it's cool to see their kids growing up even though we live so far away. But what it's also allowed is it's allowed predators to talk to kids in a way that they don't have to do all the work that they used to do before. They can talk to a child while the child is in the privacy of their own home. With social media, there are no real guardrails to setting up accounts. When it comes to setting up anything with Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, all the platforms, they require you to be 13 years of age. But that's it. So I could get online right now on Instagram and create a brand new account that says that I'm 15 years old. The only thing that Instagram requires of me is a date of birth that says I'm 15. I am 43. But online, I can be anybody I want. Anybody I want. When it comes to social media, you have 2 options. You have public and you have private. That's it. Those are your 2 options. So you have to put a date of birth that says you're 13 and older, and you have to set your account to public or private. Private means you're only connected to the people that you know. Public is every Tom, Dick, and Harry can follow you. Most kids want their account set to public because they want their videos to go viral. They want that instant fame that is available to you. An influencer is a real job, right? And so for your video to go viral, for you to have more influence, you have to have more people following you, so you have it set to public. When it's set to public, that means someone can direct message you, and they can talk directly to you as though they have your texting phone number, but they don't. There was a middle school group of kids that was surveyed, and 92 to 96% of middle schoolers said that they had set their accounts to public. Out of those kids, 75% said they interacted with someone for which they did not know. And less than 50% of parents check their kids' phones. Parents have that one conversation that says, hey, be wise, don't talk to people, like the basics of the phone, and then they are hands off most often and don't really check back in. They think that their kid is smarter than that. It would never fall for something like that. But just having an honest conversation about who they're talking to, who are you talking to, like without a child feeling like, oh, I'm in trouble. Like having a real conversation about who you're talking to can go a long way. One of the examples I give of how easy it is for a child to talk to someone they don't know is this. Let's say a girl, she turns 16, and she finally gets the Nike Air Force shoes she's been begging her parents for, right? She gets these shoes, she loves these shoes. So she puts them on the table, and she just takes a picture of her shoes and says, "Happy birthday to me." That's the post. She's not in the picture at all. It's just her shoes. Because her account is set to public, anybody can message her. Well, she's made it clear that it's her birthday, right? So someone messages her and says, "Hey, happy birthday, baby girl." She says, "Thanks." They say, "Is blue your favorite color?" Because she's got the Nike shoes and she's got a blue swoosh. And she says, "Yeah, blue's my favorite color." And they say, "Oh, blue's my favorite color too." Not weird. There's a lot of us in here that like the color blue. But grooming looks a lot like a friendship, so they're trying to find a commonality. So they tell her, "Blue's my favorite color too." They say, "Oh, I bet your boyfriend really likes your style. You got like a swag, like you got a really cool look." And she says, "No, I don't have a boyfriend." A pretty girl like you doesn't have a boyfriend? Oh, I find that hard to believe. "No, I don't have a boyfriend." "Well, I bet Dad tries to keep the guys away from your house." "No, my dad left us when I was 5. Right there, that little interaction gives a trafficker, gives a predator all the information that they need to know. Because trafficking typically boils down to 3 tactics. It's usually these 3 tactics. The first one is, "I'll be your boyfriend, your lover." So a pretty girl like you doesn't have a boyfriend. Man, what I would do for a girlfriend like you. The second one is, "I'll be your daddy, your protector." It's the same thing, just different, and you only have to ask a few more questions to figure out which one it is. And the third one is promises of luxury. So if you like the Nike shoes, you can get the Nike outfit, and you're 16, you want a cool car. It's promises of luxury that are never going to come. Social media has allowed us to be engaged in a way that we've never been connected before in all of history. Never been connected the way that we are now. But when you look at statistics, statistically, teenagers to young adults are more depressed in a way for which they've never been. Ever in history. Instagram is the perfect shot. It's the perfect angle. It's the highlight reel of life that on this side, when I'm looking at the picture, I didn't know you took 25 pictures to get that picture. I see the one picture that looks perfect. And when you're on your phone like this all day long, and you're looking at everyone's highlight reel, it makes you feel like your life sucks. They say that it only takes roughly 8 minutes for a groomer or predator to make a connection with a child through messaging. 5-ish, 8 minutes, and they have a bond that they can continue to grow. Do you know how many minutes a child is on their phone? On average, roughly 5 hours a day. So 300 minutes available, and it only takes 5 to 8 to connect with someone? It's crazy. As Carly talked about, sextortion is real. It's a real thing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's hard, but it's real. Another misconception is buyers. We somehow think that because sex trafficking is so evil and dark, we think that only scummy people buy. That is not true. In May of this year, they did a sting in North Olmsted. One of the men that was arrested for purchasing sex was previously the superintendent of Westlake City Schools. You look at a superintendent and you think that they're a good guy. Nobody is perfect. None of us are perfect. But you look at a superintendent and you think that they're one of the good ones. He was arrested for making arrangements to have sex with a minor. His whole career, he was around kids. You would think he was a good guy. Just recently in Ohio, they did a operation called Buyer's Remorse, and it was at the end of September. 160 people were arrested for soliciting sex. The youngest person arrested was 17 years old. The oldest person was 84. 1784, that's like everybody, right? One of the men that was arrested was the co-founder of Cleveland's Breakthrough Charter School. He was a gentleman also who had made his career of being around kids. 68-year-old man was arrested. When you look at court records, it shows you that it is your pastors, your coaches, your teachers, sometimes even law enforcement, people that are disguised as good guys that are wanting to have sex with kids. You know, it boils down to supply and demand. It's all about dollars and cents. And if there wasn't a demand to have sex with kids, this would not even be a business. It's multifaceted on where the demand comes from, but it's just, unfortunately, kids are the victims and kids are being used. Their innocence is being stolen. Across the whole United States, there's roughly 1,000 beds available for survivors. 1,000. It's the second largest growing industry in all of the world, but we have about 1,000 beds available. Then you divide those beds. You have adult facilities and you have juvenile facilities. At juvenile facilities, you're less than 500 facilities available for kids. So what we're doing is I have founded an organization called Safe Harbor, Ohio. And we are currently in construction. We have 30 acres in Holmes County where we're building an entire campus for juveniles. We'll be taking in girls as young as 14 up to 18. On our campus, we will have cottages. A cottage is designed to hold 4 girls plus a cottage caregiver, and everybody has their own bedroom and their own bathroom. One of the biggest things in healing is being able to have privacy. And so a cottage ends up holding 5 people. It's a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom cottage. We have 3 cottages that we're building, that are built right now. In our administration building, we actually have a medical wing. Well, we have partnered with Springvale Health Centers, and on site, we're able to do primary care from head to toe. We can manage behavioral medicines with our counseling and our psychiatry. We'll be able to do gynecology, dental, and eye care all on site. We also have a school building on our campus. We partner with Quaker Digital Academy, and we're able to do education for a child. A lot of times when a girl is being trafficked, she's really struggling in school because of all the things that are happening outside of school. So we may have a 16-year-old girl that shows up. When we do her assessment, she might register like she's 5th grade. How do we get her caught up? Well, we have Quaker Digital Academy that's going to create a plan specific to her to get her to where she needs to be. We also have a chapel on site. We're a faith-based organization. But we will not force Jesus on anyone. That's not even how that works with your friends, right? It's about loving people right where they're at. Our strategy is renew, rebuild, restore. We're going to renew her faith in humanity. Everyone that she's trusted, the majority of the people that she's trusted that brought her to our door have betrayed her. We want her to know that there are good people in the world that really want the best for her with no strings attached. We're going to help rebuild. If you know about anything about trauma, it changes the way you view yourself. It changes the way you view the world. We want her to know that her value isn't in the fact that she made money. Her value isn't in her body. Her value is in the fact that God created her. We want her to know that the things that happened to her were things that happened to her. They're not who she is. And that the shame and guilt that she carries isn't hers to carry. And we're going to help restore her back into society. While we're working with a girl, we're also identifying who are the good people in her life. We hope that it's a mom or dad, but that's not always the case. It could be an aunt, it could be a cousin. Who are they? And while we're working with her, we do expect to work with them. So we'll be doing counseling sessions with them. You know, we can do them through FaceTime, through Zoom, even through the phone. But we expect to do conversations with them because we can't have her in a good place and then go back to a place that isn't equipped. Because trauma doesn't magically disappear. When she goes back home, wherever home is, she could easily just go to a coffee shop just to get a coffee. And from a distance, she sees someone who kind of looks like someone she used to know. That can cause her to spiral. We have to make sure that the good people in her life are equipped to help her with that because the goal is long-term success. We can't magically take human trafficking out of her life and out of her story. It doesn't work like that. We can't just take it out. But at Safe Harbor, we're going to work really, really hard that it's not the thing that defines every decision for the rest of her life. You know, statistically, they say that you can pass trauma down from generation to generation, right? I believe that you can also pass down healing. And that it won't just be the girls that we work with at Safe Harbor that'll be forever changed. It's when she's a mom one day. And her kids and her kids' kids. We are on target to open in the first quarter of 24. And for phase 1 construction, we were able to house 12 girls long term. Phase 2 construction puts us at 24. At 24 beds, we become the largest facility in the northeast part of the United States. 24 is such a small number, but the need is so great. We can take in girls from Ohio, but we can also take in girls from neighboring states. There's not a facility like this anywhere near us. It's a game changer, but it's the right thing. We're helping to restore the lives of kids. A girl that comes to our facility that's 14, she should be worried about doing her hair and the cute boy at school and what she's going to wear, not recovering from being sold to men who want different things over and over and over again. Back at the table, I do have pamphlets that if you want to pick up, you can to learn more about what we're doing. But we really believe that God can make a difference. Statistically, a survivor, as you mentioned, Carl, can't recover. But I know that God can take broken pieces and make them whole in a way that professionals stand in awe because according to their books, it doesn't make any sense. We're going to be working hard to put the pieces back together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa. And one of the many things racing through my mind just listening to you speak is you're a married mother of two living in the area, and 9 years ago, you got a call. I mean, you saw something that I have to do something. And I think many times that's what people ask is, what can I do? How do I help? And could you just comment a little bit just about how did that play out? I mean, you went from a nudge to all the things that you're doing right now. And I know your first response is it has nothing to do with you. But share the mechanics of this. I mean, did you meet somebody that inspired you? Or what was your first step? Or how do people do something about this?
So when you were reading my thing, I talked about that moment where I saw all the umbrellas, right? And so I'm in an arena of 13,000 people, and you see umbrellas standing up, and the lady on stage says, if you're holding an umbrella, you represent someone. That was so profound because it's one thing to read numbers, read them here, but to look across the room and see physical people standing up, it was a whole different thing. And so I immediately came back to Ohio and started wondering, like, where does it happen? Where does it happen? Who are the good guys? All of that, and started just diving in. So I volunteered with organizations that were making a difference, just to learn more about it, to really understand the magnitude of what we were fighting, you know? And so the more I got into it, the more I understood that there was a need to provide housing. You know, there's just a need. That it's unfortunately just a huge missing link. And so, working at New Point, one of our missions partners was 8 Days of Hope. And 8 Days of Hope is an organization that mobilizes skilled labor whenever there's a natural disaster. So whenever you have a hurricane or tornado, they literally mobilize people that know how to build things, and they go to that area and they rebuild. It doesn't cost the homeowner anything. And the reason they're called 8 days, because 8 in the Bible is a new beginning, and they wanted to create a new beginning for people that had lost everything. Well, 4 years ago, 8 Days of Hope launched a new arm in their ministry. And so they were already doing natural disasters, and Steve Tiber, the founder of 8 Days of Hope, had learned really about the tragedy of human trafficking in the United States and how there was a need for beds. And so they launched a new arm in their ministry, which was for human disasters. And they began partnering with organizations that were fighting trafficking, whether you needed office space, you needed beds, you needed renovations, like whatever that looked like, and they would mobilize that same skilled labor to do that. And so one of the very first projects that they did was with an organization in Texas. Texas had a facility for juvenile girls, and they wanted to add equine to their facility. And one of their board members had heard about Steve and reached out and all of that, and they went out and did it. And so when we started talking about what could this look like, we had a model that was working in Texas. We had the builders with 8 Days of Hope, and just started talking about what if. So we, in 2020, when the world was shut down and no one was doing anything, we were having Zoom calls. In 21, December 19th, actually, it was the end of the year, in December 19th of 21, we went public, and we said, we are Safe Harbor, and here's what we're wanting to do. In 22, I had a donor donate 30 acres of land, and here we are in 23, building. And what's crazy is 8 Days of Hope is mobilizing volunteers. So the last 2 weeks, I've had 85 volunteers on site from all over the United States, representing over 14 different states. They drove to Ohio to volunteer their time to build a facility for girls that they'll never meet. But that's the fingerprints of God. Like when the Bible talks about exceedingly and abundantly, that's exactly what that is. Never in my wildest dreams would I ever think it would be like that. But it's not a Melissa project, it's a God project. And that's exactly why it's been able to accelerate so quickly and so fast. Because I know that God sees the girls right now that wonder where he's at. If you're so big and mighty, where are you? Why aren't you helping me? But he's working in a way for which she doesn't know to create a place where she'll be forever changed. Yeah, we started having conversations in 2020, and we're going to be open in the first quarter of 24. It's wild.
That's awesome. That's just fantastic. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your story, for your inspiration, and for being here today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, folks, the good news is we do have some time for some questions. We've got about 20, 25 minutes, and I invite anyone, just raise your hand. Valerie has a microphone that she can bring so everyone can hear your question. And you're welcome to ask any of the panelists, any question that's on your mind. So we'll open it up now.
What would you suggest for parents with these groomers online? What would you suggest tactics for parents to help their child or try to avoid that grooming process, get them to understand what you're saying is the right thing and not what this groomer is saying? Because a lot of times the kids will listen to the groomer because it's more of what they want to hear versus the parents. So, and anybody can answer this.
Yeah, I think you're right. You could get 6 very, very good answers. I'll defer to Hallie. Would you mind taking that one?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts about that. I'm sure you guys do too, but something I can think of that's really important is to have a really open relationship with your children where if something is happening, they feel safe coming to you and talking to you, to where no matter what happened, whether they had sex with someone, whether they sent a nude picture, that your response, they're not going to feel shame. Even if they did something that wasn't seen as responsible, they need to know that if they come to you, they're still going to be, they're going to be received with love and be able to have an open conversation with you. I think instilling that confidence in them, too, is really important so that if someone does reach out to them, they're less likely to respond if they know they have that support at home. And also, even if they are doing things that you wouldn't agree with, I think still not responding with shame and keeping that line of communication open is really important, because when they are ready to talk, they want to know that you're still going to be there. We tell that to the youth we work with all the time. There's times when I get their referral from court and I'll have 10 pages about their story. And a lot of times, we don't even read it because they've been exploited enough, and I want them to they can tell me their story and they can come talk to me when they're ready. I'm not sitting there trying to get all these answers out of them, but I want them to come to me when they're ready as well, if they choose to.
Teresa, you had something to add?
Yeah, and we also want to look at, too, looking at how do you prevent the next trafficker. And then you're looking at, don't forget, just not females are trafficked, but males, too. I don't know if you guys, back in my high school years, they had the canine dogs that came in, and they were sniffing the drugs, sniffing the lockers to see if there's a child involved with, you selling drugs. Well, you got to think about with human trafficking as well now. Drug trafficking and human trafficking is running hand in hand. We're also looking for signs of some of the kids that they're involved with, their peers, may be recruiters into the life of trafficking for the main traffickers. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to if there's your kids coming in, home with, stuff that like tennis shoes or extra money that's not accounted for and things. You want to ask a lot of questions. You may think that they're involved with drug trafficking, but you want to also look toward human trafficking. And all the girls that they're talking to and things, they may be forced into, then they could also be enforced into being a recruiter into the life of trafficking. So we don't look at just, females being trafficked in, the grooming stuff. Also look at the males too.
Now it's just a brief follow-up question. That was such a good question. What's and all kids are different, but what's generally age appropriate to start to have this kind of conversation?
So I would say fifth grade. A lot of times in the fifth grade, they've already had the child, the sex education. And then also leads me to what we're doing on the, as I'm on the Ohio Attorney General's Legal and Legislative Subcommittee. We're looking at, with Aaron's Law. Aaron's Law looks back for, the name was Aaron Marin, who was a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. We're looking at the mandate for all children, age appropriate, fifth grade and over, that's going to be required to also have a big piece of human trafficking part of the curriculum. The teachers have to make sure that they have been trained on human trafficking awareness. So that's coming down the pipes, actually before the end of this year, that mandate for the school systems. So that curriculum in order for the school to be able to provide is going to have to be closely looked at and measuring the effectiveness of it. It's going to take like 6 weeks for it to be approved by the Ohio Department of Education. So there's mandates coming down for the state of Ohio. Your children will be trained on human trafficking. It's going to be a mandate from the state of Ohio for the school systems. And the teachers will be trained as well too, how to identify. And then like for me, going in, I need to know your policies and procedures with if your child is suspected by a teacher or a school official that to be involved with human trafficking. What do you do? So there's going to be lots of things that's put in place into the school systems.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
This was a real eye-opener. And as I'm sitting here taking notes on all the speakers, wonderful notes at that, I thought PTSD, how often that word come up relating to your stories. That was a surprise to me. As I was taking these notes, I thought, who do you trust in this world? And it made me look at my own life. I'm a widow twice. I've just moved forward. And now new people are in my life, and I'm sitting here thinking about these people. Did I make a good choice? I feel I did. My spiritual life is strong. I never abandoned my faith. I've heard that when something comes along in your life which is traumatic, you do two things. You either embrace your faith or you abandon it. And I never abandoned it. All of you, I admire you greatly. And I thank God every day for taking care of you. The recoverers. There isn't a day goes by that I do not pray for all children, victims of human trafficking, and for their perpetrators, that God will have mercy on them. I thank you, and I thank God for bringing every one of you here. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. And one of the thoughts that I'd like to ask Carl to respond to, I think a lot of times we probably all hear that there's a sense of hopelessness, or who do I trust, or what do I do, or where do I start, and all those kinds of things. Where's the hope, right? But there is hope. There's absolutely hope. And I picked Carl here because he's probably one of the most hope-filled people I have ever met. Carl, share with the crowd, why is there hope?
Well, that's the good thing is there are a lot of bad people doing a lot of terrible things in the world, but there's also a lot of good people that want to do good things in the world. I said it earlier, people just like you that help these situations, that's the hope that I see. And the other thing is, like, we take children that are probably typically living in a grass hut with a dirt floor, and offer them a scholarship. They might only be having 10 meals a week. When we meet them, we give them 20 meals a week, and that's because Saturday is brunch day. They get to sleep in. And the hope that is in these children, they might have lost both their parents to death or prison or drugs or whatever it is, but it doesn't take very much love, as she was saying, that it changes their lives miraculously. And we've taken over a couple of thousand children in, and we've had about 6 of them that needed some counseling. And I think probably every one of them was because they were molested before they got to us. But that hope makes a big difference, and it just starts with one person. Everyone up here is one person, and they just said, enough, I'm going to do something about it. And I think that's the hope, and every one of you could do something about it. Change it in your community, change it in the school, whatever it is. But the good people are where the hope comes from, and in my case, I have faith as well, and I believe God does it. And I think that's who spoke to my heart. And he wants what's good for all of us. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your words.
Hi, I'm Jalen Fisher. I'm in middle school, and I just wanted to say thank you because I've always, my mom's always talked about human trafficking with me, but I've never really thought about it until she signed me up for this. And I actually didn't want to come today, but I'm really glad I did. And hearing all of your stories really it sticks with me. It's gonna stick with me now because how all of you guys are making a difference in the world for kids like us and helping us, it means a lot. And I hope that with all of your guys' help that less people will have to go through that again. Thank you.
Certainly. Carl?
And I want to say, please take my card and ask your teacher to have us come into the school and teach all of your friends so we can prevent your whole school from being trafficked.
Kwame?
Yeah, I forgot to mention something earlier. I'm actually in process of opening a home shelter for male survivors. Across the country, you can look at the statistic, there's barely any homes for males, boys, adults, nothing. God has given this new mission to open a shelter for male survivors, and eventually I would do something with the young kids and the minors as well too. But right now, the first mission is to open a shelter for male survivors. Special labor. I mean, you see across here, anywhere you go, you don't see males coming out and talking about the situation because of the social stigma that we have placed on males. And trafficking happening is only the males are the buyers. The males are this. The males it's always the males doing the bad thing. People don't know that also the males are being victims. Are being trafficked as well. And I'm one of them. And there are many of us out there. The reason why we don't know about them is because of the social stigma that we place on them. And so that's why I fight. That's why I come to this event to show that males are also being affected. So I need to have a place for these males so they can feel safe. They can feel like they are home. They can feel like they are welcome. That they can feel like they can be a useful member of society. So that's my mission right now. I've been working with Melissa recently, so she has more experience than I do. So hopefully she will continue to help me and guide me the right way. So that's my mission right now. So it's been an awesome mission. So I just wanted to say that males need help. We need help. I need help.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, I think, do not get discouraged, right? Because if we do, that's how we get defeated. I mean, there is a lot that can be done. You're looking at some incredible heroes. I told you these were heroes, right? These are people that could have gotten discouraged but didn't. And I think that can be true of all of us. So even if it's just in a small way, like someone passing Carl's business card to your teacher, I mean, there's so many different ways that all of us can make a difference. Other questions?
Thank you all again so much for everything that you shared today. My name is Father Mark Ott. If that name sounds familiar, that's because I'm very proudly Tim's cousin. But also, the ministry that I do, I teach at St. Mary's Seminary, so I'm forming the next generation of leaders in the Catholic Church in this region, in Cleveland and Youngstown. I teach scripture there and do priestly formation. A few of you shared, as part of your story, the very sad truth of being exploited by people in Christian leadership, and that just shatters me every time I hear it, no matter what the Christian denomination is or where it comes from, because that's been the passion of my life for the last 12 years of doing formation. I wanted to just offer a couple of comments to give you hope in what's happening right now. I know I've been, again, working at the seminary for 12 years, and with each passing year we grow, I think, wiser and better understanding of the work of psychology and the mix of psychology and spirituality in forming future leaders, and understanding the things that you are pointing out here today, that it's wounded people who wound other people. And so much of seminary formation in these current days focuses on making sure that the future leaders are healthy themselves and who understand how they are loved and how they need to find healing and be very appropriately vulnerable at all times. So we're working very hard to make sure that happens, so that hopefully these kinds of offenses will not be perpetuated in the future from Christian leaders. And I also just wanted to thank you especially for sharing your stories, because we all hear like vague statistics about human trafficking and things like this, but the personal stories have such a deeper impact, I think, than numbers do, than statistics do, as atrocious as the statistics are. And so I just wanted to say I'm really grateful to hear your stories, and I promise to share them, again, in the capacity that I can with our current and future leaders in the Christian community, because we have a wide reach, and the words that you share here, I just want to do my part to help those get as far and wide as possible, so that more and more leaders in the Christian community can understand where this comes from, why this happens in our schools, in our PSR programs, in our youth sports and youth ministry programs, just to be able to identify and get the message out there and help you do what you're doing. Just extend your reach as far and wide as possible. So I'm grateful for any other information that I can find on this, just to help to form our Christian leaders to understand these signs and do our part to end all of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And speaking of, information, I know, Carl, you said you've got some information back there. Melissa, I know you do. Kwame, you do as well.
You know Mary Von Carlwith? Yes. Yeah, her and I, we've been working together, trying to bring stuff to the seminary right now. So I know she's busy with a lot going on right now, but in near future, we are trying to put together a resource guide for the seminarians and also the Cleveland Diocese school system as well. So we can chat after. I can loop you.
I see her all the time.
Perfect.
Not during class, too.
Okay, I will loop you in then. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a
Yeah.
small world. Other questions?
I've been a counselor for 3 years, and I work mainly with children. And so the main form of trafficking that I've heard about and worked with is familial. And so I know that my dad, Tim, talked about it for a little bit. And some things that I encouraged parents and people like teachers that would ask me questions to talk to kids about are if anyone asks to touch or see body parts that are covered by a bathing suit, that's something to look out for. Teaching kids the difference between good secrets and bad secrets, that's very important. And then encouraging parents to use the correct terms for body parts, I think that's very important too. But I didn't know if there was anything that any of you would encourage adults, like teachers, aunts, uncles, grandparents, to teach kids so that they're more aware of like grooming tactics.
That's a great question. Teresa, how would you respond to that?
So it's just teaching them basically, bottom line, what does a healthy versus an unhealthy relationship look like? So teaching them that. And then when you talked about like when we look at like familial, I wanted to say, because you said you were a counselor. So a red flag as a counselor and also teacher that I teach also is you're looking at the transient students. Pay attention to your transient students. Like, let's say I did actually have a student when I was training back in Lorain County in April of last year. This student came from another county. She was transferred from another county. Her family moved. One of the things is you're asking the question is, why is this student relocating this, toward the end of the year, this late in the year? School year is getting ready to be over. That's one thing you're looking at. And then you want to make sure that you're able to be privy to look at that student's prior history as far as grades and things before they came to that school system, what they look like, because those grades are going to be an indicator. And look at the housing composition and then look at how that student is acting in that classroom. So that's one thing that I wanted to emphasize on and I could do with teachers and counselors. But definitely, you need to be teaching your kid with a healthy versus unhealthy relationship. And I tell people, like, parents, your daughter shouldn't be sitting in another man's lap ever. Allowing them to sit in another man's lap. Only lap they should be sitting in is their father's. So, yeah.
We have time for one last question. Right here.
Thank you all for coming and sharing this with us. Really appreciate each and every one of you. My question is the safety for you guys. It's my belief that somewhere in the higher ups of our society, money's being trickled up to them, which is why it's so difficult to stop drugs and human trafficking. Somewhere at the top level where legislation is, someone's getting paid from these illicit, it's my belief, from these illicit activities. How dangerous is it for you guys to help these girls and help these boys come out of, you're like taking someone's money from them. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Like, it's been said many times that for those that go in and actually save these girls and save these boys, it's very dangerous for them to go in and get them because the people that are trafficking don't like this to lose money. I hope I'm saying this correctly, but how dangerous is it for you guys to to do what you're doing?
It's such a great question. Thanks for asking it. Kwame, do you care to respond to that?
Absolutely. Like I was saying earlier, my trafficker was very smart. These traffickers, all of them, they are very smart. They are always 2 or 3 steps ahead of what we are doing right here now. We are meeting, talking. They're already doing that already. They're already done that already. They know the next step. They know who the next victim is. They already know who the next victim is. Just think about that. While we are sitting here, they already done the plan and know who the next victim is. That's disgusting. That's gross to think about. And that's what my trafficker did. He was very manipulative. He came to the school. You want to know why it's dangerous? It's very dangerous for my teacher who was fighting to get me out of his house. It was dangerous for her. She put her life on line for me. My trafficker threatened her every single day. He would come to the school and cast her out, but nobody could do anything about it. It's very dangerous. It's a business. It's money. Yeah, I'm making the money for him, so why would he allow me to leave? It's dangerous. It is dangerous, and it's going to always be, until we do something about it, disrupt that movement, or forget about it. Every kid is going to be a fact. Every kid is going to be involved, old, young. There's nothing we can do about it. So. That's the question for you.
We're disrupting an evil business. It's one thing to look at a movie, if you saw The Sound of Freedom, it's one thing to look at a movie and see like these bad guys kill each other on screen. But it's a real thing. you are disrupting a business. So every girl that will be at Safe Harbor will be a girl that's no longer making money somewhere else. That's a real thing. We have to be mindful of that. You know, for our facility, we're site secure. You will never see our address anywhere. We have a P.O. box. We will never have our address anywhere. Our facility will have security 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have to be mindful about what we do and where we do it. But so does everybody in the room, you know, because we live in an evil world. That's just the reality, you know? But just because it's evil doesn't mean we should do nothing. I refuse to walk in fear. I refuse. For evil to prevail, good men do nothing. I refuse to do nothing. I think all of us up here refuse to do nothing. Not everybody has like this big elaborate task, but we can all play a part. And so yes, it is dangerous, but that does not deter the fight, because someone has to fight.
If I can add, with your question, when you're talking about organized crime, okay? So public corruption is the nexus or companion with human trafficking, all right? So I've dealt with let's say one victim that I know, she's now a survivor, because remember the verbiage, when you're in the life of trafficking, you're a victim. Once you're extracted, you're out, or the other terms you use, recovered or rescued, you're a survivor, all right? So I've dealt with one where when her mother went to go talk to the police officers to get more information regarding her case, she would get beat worse, you know, always getting beat up. It was because that there was law enforcement involved with the trafficking, all right? So keeping the traffickers one step ahead on what, you know, the organization as far as the intel within the law enforcement agency is, you're trying to be, they're one step ahead. So yeah, and it's pretty scary, you know, but I believe, like for me, my purpose is greater than fear. You know, if I leave this earth today, I will take my last breath saving a person from human trafficking, you know, or extracting them out of the life of trafficking. So you can't let fear get in there. And as a Christian, I believe that God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies those whom which he calls, all right? And then the gentleman back there that was talking about with the seminary and stuff, I want to say that healing, and people need to realize that healing is every day for us survivors of human trafficking recovery. You know, people put a timeline on it. There's no timeline. Even for myself, I still deal with that PTSD. You know, you look at me, everything is together, but still mentally, I still have some areas that I still have to work on, but it's going to be with me for the rest of my life, you know? And so when you think of us, survivors of human trafficking or victims of human trafficking, I tell people, remember Teresa. My name's Teresa. T, the first T, the trial being trafficked for us victims, right, for the victims. Then the second T being the trauma, the effects of the trafficking. And the third T is triumphing over the whole ordeal. You go from being a victim to a survivor, and I'm not even a survivor anymore, I'm a survivor, all right? And you're helping other leaders. So yeah, I thought that helps, so yeah.
Well, that might be a good place for us to try and draw a close to this. We're out of time. So lots of great questions. Thank you very much. I want to thank each one of these heroes again as we go across here. Thank you, Carly, Teresa, Hallie, Carl, Kwame, and Melissa. Thank you so much for your time, for everything that you have to share. I have to thank again the city of Greene. The Greene schools have been amazing. This doesn't happen unless we get that kind of support. So thank you very much. And most of all, thank you for being here, for taking the time out on a rainy day. For those of you that are dialing in with the live stream, sitting in a little bit more of a cozy place without the rain, thank you for dialing in. But hopefully you leave here, we go back to the goals. Goals were education and awareness. Hopefully we've accomplished that for you today. Secondly, we want you to listen, and obviously you've listened very, very well. Third is we want you to take something away from this and do it with courage, do it with inspiration, do it with hope. Because together, we're going to kick this thing's butt. Thanks. And the panelists, I think, are going to be around just to rub shoulders with you afterwards. So feel free to come up and talk to anybody that you'd like. Thank you.